They were just starting to close the casket when she leaned in behind me and whispered real low and calm, "You've got 1 week to move out." I still had the funeral program sitting in my lap, my hands clenched around the edge without even realizing it, bending the paper. I didn't turn around. I just sat there like I hadn't heard a thing, frozen, while the priest kept talking about closure and peace. My son Jason was gone. Only 33, a heart attack that came out of nowhere. And he was the only soul in this world who ever really cared about me. And now here I was, sitting beside his casket while his wife Brittany stood there in her sleek black dress and fake tears, already plotting to get rid of me. After she said it, she even gave my shoulder a gentle squeeze like she was comforting me or something. I didn't react. I stayed completely still. Before we continue, if you're watching, please like and subscribe, and tell me what's one life lesson everyone needs to learn before it's too late. Share it in the comments. Thanks. Anyway, she stood up and walked off to greet another guest. "She's been so strong," someone whispered behind me. "Losing a husband that young, it's just unthinkable." I wanted to laugh, but all I felt was a sharp burn in my chest. I didn't say a word through the whole service, not even during the last prayer, not when folks started heading toward the reception hall. When it was time to leave, Brittany made a big show of helping her grandma to the car, leaving me standing there alone. I rode back with her in Jason's car, but she didn't say a single word. The whole ride smelled like his cologne, and I thought that might break me, but my mind was too busy trying to figure out what she was really up to. Back at the house, she ushered everyone inside, then gave a little speech about Jason's strength, his sense of humor, and how much he loved family. I stood behind the kitchen island in silence. She passed around wine, made a toast, hugged people like she was starring in some TV drama. But I saw the signs. The family photo by the stairs. Gone. His old army storage case. Gone. She was already wiping him out of the house. After everyone left, I headed to my room. The room I'd lived in for 7 years. The door was wide open. My blankets had been folded, the nightstand lamp unplugged. I checked the dresser. Half my drawers were empty. My jewelry box was missing. In the closet, there were boxes labeled "Mom's stuff." I stood there just trying to process. I walked out past the kitchen and saw Brittany sitting at the dining table with a glass of wine, scrolling through her phone. She didn't even look up. I cleared my throat. "Did you move my things?" She finally looked over and said, "I was just organizing. I can call a moving company whenever you're ready." Like it was some polite gesture. I asked her where my jewelry was. "Some of it's in the safe," she said. Didn't want anything to go missing while people were in and out. I told her I never asked her to touch my things. She took a sip of wine. "Jason and I discussed this," she said. "It's not personal. We just figured you'd want to move back in with your sister." "I don't have a sister. He knows that." I stared at her. "This is my home." She gave a small shrug. It was his home. He'd want us to have the space to grieve. Then she picked her phone back up like I wasn't even there. I left before I said something I couldn't take back. I went back to my room and checked the drawers again, trying to breathe, trying to think. The box I kept under the bed. Gone. I opened the closet and pulled down a bin marked "Old Docs." I dug through it, receipts, junk mail, warranty papers, and then I found it. A folder with my medical records, old bank paperwork, even my passport. But the one thing I needed, the deed with both our names on it, wasn't there. I looked again. Nothing. That paper had been in that box ever since Jason and I bought the house and I helped with the down payment after he lost his job. That deed was supposed to prove my name was on the house. Her voice floated down the hall, casual. "Hey, you want the leftover salad or should I toss it?" I didn't answer. My hand was shaking. The deed was gone. Next morning the kitchen was quiet. Coffee smell had come and gone before I even stepped in. Brittany was at the table, tapping on her laptop like it was just any other weekday. She looked up. "Morning. Just getting quotes for movers." I opened the fridge. My labeled containers. Gone. All replaced by neat little Tupperware containers that weren't mine. "I didn't ask for movers," I said. She didn't even glance at me. "Right, but you mentioned wanting to be on your own timeline. Just thought I'd help." She sipped her coffee and clicked something fast. I walked into the living room. Jason's old recliner had been replaced with a cheap-looking leather chair. His blanket was stuffed behind the TV stand like it belonged to a dog. "Where's Jason's recliner?" I asked. He shrugged. It was old. Didn't fit the room anymore. I stared at her. "It's only been a week." He gave me a look. It's been 9 days. I'm not sitting in a dead man's chair, Alan. That was the first time she said his name out loud. Like it didn't matter. I stepped outside to breathe. Sat on the porch steps, pulled out my phone and called a lawyer Jason once told me about when we were updating our wills. His secretary said he had an opening that afternoon. I didn't tell Brittany a thing. Just left. The lawyer, Mr. Grant, remembered Jason right away. He was a good man, he said. I'm sorry. I explained what had happened, how Brittany claimed I had to leave, how my name had been on the deed, how now the document was missing. He asked how long I'd lived in the house. 7 years, I told him. Since the day we bought it. He asked if I had any proof I contributed to the down payment. I said I used a cashier's check. Still had the receipt. His eyes lit up. Then we might have something. I asked what he meant. He said if my name was on the deed and I could prove financial contribution, she couldn't legally kick me out. He told me to find that receipt and any original home purchase paperwork. I thanked him and drove home, gripping the wheel too tight. Brittany was on the phone when I came in, pacing the hall. No, she doesn't know anything, she whispered, lowering her voice when she saw me. It's handled. I walked past her straight to the attic. Jason had kept boxes up there from before they got married. School files, tax records, moving documents. I climbed up, heart pounding, and started ripping them open. Dust everywhere. I found his college box, his military box, then one marked home purchase. My heart jumped. I yanked it down, sat on the floor and dug through it, closing papers, insurance, loan approvals, and then I saw it. A manila envelope labeled Final Deed. I opened it. My name. My signature. His. All dated, notarized, filed. I stared at it for a long moment. Brittany had either never seen this, or she had and was banking on me not finding it. I tucked the envelope into my coat and started climbing down. She was waiting at the bottom of the ladder. Looking for something? She asked, raising her eyebrows. I looked her right in the eye. Just some old paperwork. Nothing important. She gave a tight smile. That's good. I'd hate to see you getting worked up. She turned and walked off toward the kitchen like we hadn't just had a silent standoff in the living room. That night I scanned the deed and emailed it to myself. I made copies and tucked them into a folder marked for lawyer only. I'm not stupid, she thought she had the upper hand, but now I had something to fight with. I just needed to move carefully. Around 9 p.m. Brittany came in holding 2 glasses of wine and said, I figured we should talk. Clear the air. I took the glass but I didn't drink from it. Hey, I said. She sat across from me on the couch. I know things have been tense, she began, but Jason always said this house was for us, for our future. I didn't respond. She stared down into her wine. I don't want things to get ugly. I just want to move forward. I looked at her left hand, her ring finger, still wearing his wedding band. Then she looked up. You understand, right? I asked her. Have you spoken to a lawyer? Her mouth twitched. No. I didn't think I needed to. I smiled slightly. Maybe you do. Her eyes narrowed. She took a sip. Are you threatening me, Ellen? I smiled again. No. Just thinking out loud. She stood slowly. I hope we can do this the easy way. I nodded. So do I. She turned and walked down the hall, still holding her wine like we'd had a pleasant chat. As soon as she was out of view, I pulled out my phone and checked the scan one more time. My name was right there, clear, unmistakable. She thought she'd boxed me in. She didn't know I'd found the file upstairs. The next morning, I printed 2 physical copies and slipped them into a sealed envelope with Mr. Grant's name on it. I dropped it off at his office without calling first. I told his assistant it was urgent, then walked out before she could ask anything. When I got back, Brittany was in the garage boxing things like she was cleaning out memories. Hey, she said casually when I pulled in. Just getting rid of junk. Hope that's okay. I nodded and walked past her into the house, pretending not to see that Jason's fishing gear had disappeared. I went to my room and opened the top nightstand drawer, but it didn't budge. That drawer had never been locked. I grabbed a flathead screwdriver and forced it open. My prescription bottle was gone. So was my little emergency cash envelope. I understood the message. There was no privacy anymore. I sat on the bed, breathing through my teeth until the pressure in my chest let up. Then I did something I hadn't been able to since the funeral. I went into Jason's office and opened his filing cabinet. In the third drawer down, I found a folder labeled Refinance Options. Inside were newer mortgage statements with both of our names, dated less than a year ago. Brittany had never been added. Not even after the refinance. I took a photo and backed it up to my cloud. A few minutes later, I heard Brittany's voice from the hallway. She was on speakerphone. "Yeah, she's still here," she said. "I know it's awkward, but she doesn't have any real claim." A pause, then, "No, her name's not on the utilities or tax records. It'll be fine." I stepped out just loud enough for her to hear me. She turned sharply, eyes wide. "Everything okay?" she asked. "You should be careful what you say in this house," I said. "The walls are thin." Then I walked to the kitchen and started making coffee, like nothing had happened. For the rest of the day she kept her distance. Around 6, I passed through the living room and noticed the family portrait was gone, replaced by a cold landscape of snow-covered mountains. No people. Just emptiness. I stared at it longer than I meant to. That night she ordered Chinese takeout and left mine in the bag on the counter. No note. No word. I took the food, went back to my room and locked the door from the inside with the wedge I'd been using all week. I wasn't taking chances. At 2 a.m. I heard footsteps outside my door. Slow. Intentional. I got up and pressed my ear to the wood. No knock. Just a pause, then footsteps moving away. In the morning my alarm clock was flashing. The power had gone out, for exactly 1 minute. I checked the breaker. Everything was fine. At breakfast she offered me coffee like nothing had happened. I didn't reply. I just went straight back to Mr. Grant's office. This time I sat down across from him and laid out the refinance documents, the deed and photos of everything I'd found. He looked through each one, nodding as he read. "She has no legal standing," he said. "Her name isn't on anything. You've lived there over 7 years, contributed financially and have documentation. If she tries to remove you, she'll lose." I asked if I could take action first. He nodded. "We'll file a notice of shared ownership and prepare a legal response in case she tries anything. But keep your record safe. That's the only risk." I thanked him and drove home with my hands calm on the wheel. Not grief in my chest. Not fear. Just clarity. When I walked in, Brittany was folding laundry on the couch. She looked up. "Did you go somewhere?" she asked. "Just needed some air," I said. She tilted her head. "You seem confident all of a sudden." I smiled and said, "I just remembered something important." She stared for a second, then said, "Well, I hope it doesn't make things harder." I opened the fridge. My food containers were back. Same labels. Same handwriting. That night, I heard her on the phone in the guest room again. "Yeah, she's acting strange. I might need to move up the timeline." Then after a pause, "If she finds that file, we're screwed." She didn't know I'd already found it. She didn't know copies were already with my lawyer. But now I knew, this wasn't just a power move over the house. He was hiding something much bigger. 3 days later, Brittany casually told me over coffee that she was hosting a grief gathering for Jason's friends and coworkers. "Just a little closure," she said, pouring almond milk into her mug while ignoring the second one I had set down for her. She never asked me to help with anything, which was fine. That whole week, she barely spoke to me unless it was to ask me to keep the guest bathroom tidy or to avoid talking about personal stuff with anyone. I didn't argue. I didn't push back. I just watched. Watched as she dragged out Jason's old bar cart and filled it like she was hosting some cocktail hour. Watched her line the counter with imported crackers and mini quiches like this was some casual get-together. The first guest arrived a little after 6, Jason's friend Mark from work. He hugged me tight and whispered, "He talked about you all the time. Said you were the only person he could always count on." I nodded, choking back tears. Others came, neighbors, colleagues, a few of Brittany's Pilates buddies. Some I recognized. Some I didn't. Brittany glided through the room like the perfect grieving widow, wine glass in hand, giving short speeches about how generous and full of light Jason had been. I stayed near the back, quietly watching her charm people while erasing every trace of him from the house. At one point someone asked how I was holding up. "As well as I can," I said, "considering I still live here." They looked confused. So I added, "Jason and I own this house. Jason's friends think Brittany's handling things now," I told one of them, "but I still live here." Her brows lifted in surprise. "Oh. I thought she said it was her house." I smiled politely. Easy mistake. An hour later, I noticed Brittany watching me from across the room. She was still smiling, but her eyes had gone sharp, tight and calculating. When the crowd thinned, she walked over and said, "Can I speak with you for a moment?" I followed her down the hall. She shut the door behind us. "Are you trying to start something?" she asked. I looked her in the eye. I answered a question honestly. She stepped in closer. "Don't play innocent, Ellen. These people don't need to hear about deeds and paperwork." I crossed my arms. "Then stop lying about it." She stared for a long second, then reset her expression. "This is delicate. These people cared about Jason. They're here to support me." I said, "Then maybe don't throw a wine mixer in the house you're scrubbing him out of." Her face flushed with heat. "If you don't want to be here, you're free to leave." I smiled. "Oh, I'm not going anywhere." She leaned in close, just like she did at the funeral, and whispered, "You think you're clever, Ellen, but you don't know how this works. I'll make sure you regret staying." And then she walked out like nothing happened, greeting the next guest with that same perfect smile. The rest of the night I stayed quiet. I watched. I listened. One man caught my attention. Maybe mid-40s, shaved head, designer coat. He kept glancing at me like he was trying to figure something out. I saw him talk to Brittany briefly near the hall, then leave early. The way he moved, careful, guarded, stuck with me. After everyone had gone, Brittany cleaned up in silence. I didn't offer to help and she didn't ask. Around midnight, I passed by the guest room and noticed her tote bag was open, with a manila folder tucked inside that hadn't been there before. I stepped into my room, grabbed my phone and quietly snapped a photo through the crack in the door. The folder read, "Doc copies, backup plan." I waited until I heard her get in the shower. Then I stepped out into the hall and opened the tote. Inside were multiple folders. One labeled House Timeline, another marked E-Signatures 2023. I didn't take anything, I just took photos. One file had a screenshot of a will with a digital signature I didn't recognize. The corner read, "Filed March 4th. Jason had died February 2nd. He couldn't have signed anything in March." I stood frozen as the shower water shut off. I rushed to zip the tote closed and slipped into my room just as she walked past in a robe, humming like nothing was wrong. My hands were still shaking. But now I had more than a deed. I had proof she was faking control, maybe forging documents. Something bigger was happening. The next morning I woke to the sound of soft sniffling in the kitchen. Not crying, just the kind that wants to be overheard. When I walked in, Brittany was at the sink in her robe, tissue in hand, staring out the window like she was in a soap opera. When she noticed me, she turned, wiped her eyes with her palm and gave a brave little smile. "Sorry, sometimes it just hits me all over again." Then she placed a hand on her belly. Not overly dramatic, just enough that I'd notice. I froze. That was new. She looked up and said softly, "I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. I'm pregnant, Ellen." For 5 whole seconds I couldn't move. Couldn't speak. It didn't make sense. Not after everything I'd seen. Not with the timeline. "How far along?" I asked. She answered fast, too fast. 8 weeks. Maybe 9. And right then, everything snapped into place. Jason had been dead for 10. I said nothing. Just watched her walk over and place a sonogram photo on the table like a winning hand. I picked it up slowly. Her name, the clinic, and the date. 4 weeks ago, not 10. That's when I realized it had nothing to do with Jason. This was about control. She said, "I used a donor. Jason and I had talked about it just in case. He wanted me to have a piece of him." I knew that was a lie. Jason would have told me something that important. I handed the photo back without saying a word. She added, "I hope you understand now why stability matters, for the baby's sake." I saw it then. She was building a sympathy narrative. A court-friendly image of the grieving widow, pregnant, forced to share her home with a hostile mother-in-law. I nodded slowly and said, "That changes things." Her whole face softened, like she thought I was backing down. Like her act had worked. As soon as she left the room, I pulled out my phone. I matched the sonogram date with the document photo I'd taken the night before. 4 days apart. Same week. Both designed to create a timeline. I forwarded both to Mr. Grant with a simple message. "We need to talk." Within the hour he called. "This actually helps us," he said. "If she's making claims based on emotional hardship or pregnancy, We can request medical records and verify the timeline. I asked him, what if she faked the whole thing? And he said, then it's fraud. And if you keep documenting this calmly, we'll win before it ever gets to court. I said, she's trying to provoke me. And he replied, then don't take the bait. And I didn't. I kept quiet. I folded laundry. I cleaned the guest bathroom. I smiled when Brittany made comments like, this baby's going to need so much space, or, it's hard raising a child in a hostile environment. He kept watching me, measuring me like she was waiting for me to snap. But I didn't give her the satisfaction. Then came Friday. I found an envelope slid under my door in a manila folder labeled urgent, 48-hour notice. Inside was a typed letter, not court-stamped, stating I had 2 days to vacate the property due to emotional instability and personal threats. I sat there reading it, heart pounding, not from fear but from how sloppily she'd handed me something I could tear apart with one email. Then I saw the last line. Failure to vacate may result in law enforcement involvement and potential elder neglect claims. And that was it. That was the angle she'd chosen. She was going to paint me as a dangerous, unstable old woman, violent, unwell, even though all I'd done for 2 weeks was make toast and fold towels. Now she was trying to scare me into running, hoping I'd cave before I could fight. But I wasn't going anywhere. I didn't speak a word. I folded the fake eviction notice, slipped it into a folder with every other lie Brittany had gifted me these past 2 weeks, and drove straight to Mr. Grant's office. No call. No delay. Because this wasn't just about proving I belonged in the house anymore. This was about dismantling the little story she was trying to sell. When I handed him the newest file, he scanned the last line and chuckled. More disbelief than humor. She's threatening you with elder neglect, he said, while you're the one being emotionally manipulated, financially erased, and legally stalked. I laid it all out. The forged timeline, the fake pregnancy dates, the IVF clinic labels, the staged sympathy scenes, the phone calls at night, the conversations I drew her into without ever raising my voice. He looked up and said, we're past family conflict. This is pre-fraud litigation. And if she altered any financial documents or used your identity in any way, Mr. Grant said, we could be looking at criminal charges. I asked him, what's the fastest way to prove that? He didn't hesitate. We file for a discovery subpoena. Her digital records, emails, texts, medical documents, banking history. If a judge sees the forged eviction, the inconsistent pregnancy claim, and proof of misrepresented ownership, we won't just have a case. We'll have leverage. And I just sat there taking it all in. For the first time since Jason died, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was finally taking the power back from someone who thought she could erase me. On my way home, I stopped at a print shop and had 3 bound copies made. The deed with my name, the refinance records, the sonogram with the wrong date, the typed eviction threat, and a list of every person who heard her lie about the house during that grief gathering. I labeled the binder spine, case file, Brittany. 1 copy went into my safe deposit box, another to Mr. Grant, and the third under a loose floorboard in my closet where she'd never find it. When I walked through the front door that evening, Brittany was in the kitchen on a video call, headset on, laughing. She was telling someone about a real estate deal. Yeah, she said, I'll have access to the place in 2 weeks tops. I froze behind the hallway wall, realizing this wasn't about grief. She didn't want the house because of Jason. He was flipping it, selling it. She wasn't even planning to stay. He just wanted to cash in. So I stepped into view, didn't say a word, just walked to the fridge, grabbed a water bottle and looked right at her. She ended the call mid-sentence and turned. Do you need something? She asked. Just a heads up, I said. If another envelope shows up at my door, it better have a court stamp. Anything else goes straight to my lawyer. Her face twitched like I'd slapped her. Are you threatening me now? She asked. You started this paperwork war, Brittany, I said. I'm just keeping mine legal. Then I turned and walked out of the room before she could say another word. That night I opened Jason's old email account, the one he'd shared with me when I helped him job hunt years ago. His password hadn't changed, his favorite song lyric plus his service number. It still worked. Most of it was nothing. Old bills, applications, but then I found a flagged folder labeled estate. Inside was a PDF. Draft will, February 2023. I opened it and stopped breathing. The signature at the bottom wasn't his. The notary stamp had been reused, cropped from something else. And the worst part? The will listed Brittany as sole heir, sole owner of the property. No mention of me at all. And the date? 1 week before he died. I printed it, careful not to touch anything else. My heart was pounding. This was the file she'd buried. The one in her tote bag. And the document metadata? It was saved under Brittany.drafts, not Jason's name. Not a lawyer's. Hers. I sent it straight to Mr. Grant with one line. She forged his will. I didn't even flinch as I hit send. The next morning, before I finished my toast, Mr. Grant called. His voice calm, direct. We're filing today. And that's when it all changed. We weren't playing defense anymore. We were going on offense. We had digital proof of forgery, intent to defraud, and metadata tracking everything back to her computer. He laid out the next steps. File a motion to freeze any property transfers, request a court review of the will, submit a fraud alert through probate, and post a legal notice on the house to block any unauthorized sale or refinance. You won't need to serve her, he said. The court will. I nodded even though he couldn't see me. Because for the first time in weeks, I wasn't the only one speaking for me. By noon I think Brittany felt the shift, because suddenly she was sweet. Offered to make lunch. Asked if I wanted to help shop for the baby. When I said no, she tilted her head and said, "Are we good?" I smiled and said, "We'll see." That afternoon while she was out, I got a call from the process server. "Delivery later today," he said. "Do not engage." I said, "Trust me, I won't." And I waited. Blinds open, calm. At 5 she pulled into the driveway in her new SUV, 2 shopping bags in hand. And just as she stepped onto the porch, a man in a gray jacket stepped out of a car across the street. He walked up the steps and said her full name, clear and practiced. She blinked. Yes. He handed her a thick envelope and said, "You've been served, probate fraud and property injunction." He stared at the papers, confused. "What the hell is this?" He said, "You'll need to read it." Then he walked away. From the living room window, I watched her hold the envelope like it weighed 50 pounds. Then she looked up, toward the house, toward me. I didn't blink. Just sat there waiting. She came inside fast and slammed the envelope down on the dining table. She tore it open, scanned the pages, then whispered, "No. No, no." Then louder, "She's lying. This is all lies." She spun around and shouted, "What did you tell them?" I stood up. I didn't tell them anything. The documents did. She threw the envelope onto the floor and stormed into the kitchen muttering, "I'll fix this. This isn't happening." But she wasn't talking to me anymore. She was talking to the world that had finally told her no. That night she didn't eat. Didn't speak. Didn't come out of her room. The next morning I found her pacing the front yard in her robe, phone pressed to her ear, whispering, "Just get me a lawyer who knows how to bury this." Then louder, "I don't care what it costs. She's just an old woman." I stood on the porch, arms crossed, letting her see me. Letting her know I heard it all. 2 days later the court date was set. A preliminary hearing, to establish will validity and deed ownership. When we walked in, Brittany wore a cream blazer and held her fake ultrasound like a prop. Her lawyer launched into some soft-spoken performance about grief, widowhood, and protecting unborn children. But Mr. Grant shut it all down with evidence. Side-by-side comparisons of Jason's real signature and the one she'd submitted. Metadata proving she edited the draft herself. Refinance documents that never once listed her. And then the final blow. The deed with my name and Jason's, legally recorded, never altered. Not touched by her. Not once. Mr. Grant stood and said, "Your Honor, my client has co-owned this property since day one." The judge flipped through the folder, leaned forward and said, "Counselor, this is extremely clear." And I watched Brittany fold in on herself. Her shoulders sagged. Her mouth opened like she wanted to scream but couldn't. Then the judge said, "Temporary freeze is lifted. Miss Ellen retains legal co-ownership. All eviction claims are void. The will is now subject to formal fraud investigation." Brittany's lawyer leaned in and whispered something to her. And the way she looked at him? Like he'd betrayed her. I stood there, steady, silent, solid, because this wasn't some victory lap. This was just the truth finally spoken out loud. And as we left the courtroom, Mr. Grant turned to me and said, "Now we wait to see if she pushes back, or packs her bags." When we got in the car, I checked my phone. There it was, an email from the court system confirming full ownership recognition. I smiled. Not out of spite, out of relief. Because Brittany could twist stories and fake photos all she wanted, but now the law knew who she really was. The house was too quiet the next morning. Not peaceful, charged. Like the kind of quiet before a storm. When I walked into the kitchen, she was already there. Dressed in all black like she was heading to another funeral. Sitting at the table with an untouched mug of coffee and a legal pad covered in phone numbers. She didn't look up. Just said, "You think you've won?" I poured my own coffee, said nothing. Let her fill the silence with her own unraveling. "You think just because you got a judge to believe your little story that it's over?" she went on. I finally turned. It wasn't a story, Brittany. It was the law. That hit something. She stood up fast, her chair screeching back across the tile. "You don't get to steal everything from me," she snapped. And I looked her straight in the eyes. "You tried to erase me from a house I helped build, from a life I never left. And you used a fake will and a fake pregnancy to do it." She froze. Mouth open. Then tried to pivot, saying, "I was grieving." But it didn't land. Not anymore. The act was dead. We both knew it. "Pack your things," I told her. "I'm giving you the same respect you never gave me. I'm not calling the sheriff, yet." She looked like she might scream, but instead she grabbed her phone and stormed out. I sat down and took a sip of coffee that, for the first time in months, didn't taste like fear. And for the next few hours the house stayed quiet. Not just on the surface but inside. Like taking the first breath after months underwater. I walked into Jason's old room. Closed the door. Sat at the edge of his bed and looked around at the walls he painted himself, the empty shelves, the drawer I hadn't opened since the funeral. I whispered, "We're okay now, baby. I promise." Then I opened that top drawer and found something I never expected. A folded piece of paper dated 3 weeks before he died, written in his own handwriting. It started, "If anything happens to me, I need you to know I'm sorry." My chest locked up as I read line after line of guilt, frustration, regret. He wrote about how Brittany had isolated him, how she made him feel like he couldn't talk to me without choosing sides. And at the bottom it said, "Don't let her take everything. This house was always ours. Not hers. Do what you have to do, Mom." I scanned the letter, locked it away beside the deed, and knew this wasn't just about property anymore. It never was. At sunset, Brittany came back with fire in her face. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "I'll go to the press. I'll tell them you bullied a grieving widow." I looked at her and said, "Then I'll show them the ultrasound dates, the forged will metadata, and the letter Jason left me." Her face went ghost white. "You're bluffing," she said. "Try me," I replied. And she turned and slammed her bedroom door so hard it knocked a picture off the wall. I picked up the frame, reset it on the hook, and made dinner like it was any other night. While the pasta boiled, I texted Mr. Grant. "Found personal letter. Strengthens motive. Will forward." He replied in seconds. "Send. It's bulletproof." And that night I slept with the window open. No wedge under the door. No spare key under the pillow. Just quiet. Just air. Just peace. The next morning I heard packing. By Sunday the hallway outside her room was lined with boxes. Some labeled, some not, some taped shut in a rush. I didn't ask if she was really leaving. I didn't need to. She was out of cards to play. When she came into the kitchen she didn't speak at first. She opened a drawer like she was looking for something that never existed. Then finally she turned to me and said, "I'll be out by Friday." I nodded, no sarcasm, no smile. Just a quiet nod, like it was a business handoff, not the end of a months-long war. She added, "You can have your house back." I looked at her. It was never yours to give. And that hit harder than yelling ever could. She froze for half a second, then looked away. I walked past her and set the kettle on the stove, not to prove a point but because I wanted tea. And by then I'd learned that the strongest move I had left was not reacting. Just living. Later that day 2 of her friends showed up. Loud voices in the hallway. Lifting boxes. Whispering things like, "She's insane," and "How did you even live here with her?" I stayed in my room. Those weren't questions worth answering. And the next morning, Brittany made one last sad move. She called Jason's old friend, Mark. Left him a voicemail saying I faked everything, that Jason never wanted me here, and that I was using elder abuse to take her home away. What she didn't know was that Mark had already spoken to me. He'd read the court documents, seen Jason's letter, and he forwarded the voicemail to me with one line: "She's desperate." I didn't respond. What was left to say? By Thursday her car was full. Last of her things. Her face pale, makeup streaked, like she'd finally realized this wasn't just a legal defeat. It was personal. It was public. And it was permanent. She came to the door with her last bag and said, "You don't have to do this." I said, "Neither did you." And she flinched like she wasn't expecting honesty. Like she wanted drama. Something to spin. But I didn't give it to her. I stood there still calm. And said, "You have until midnight." She looked at me, voice small. "Where am I supposed to go?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Anywhere that isn't here." Then I closed the door. Not to be cruel but to be done. From the window, I watched her stand frozen for a minute before finally walking to her car, slamming the trunk and driving off without looking back. And I didn't cry. I didn't celebrate. I just felt still. When the sun went down, I turned off the porch light, locked the front door, and for the first time in months, sat in silence without waiting for footsteps behind me. The house was mine again. Quiet. Clean. Unclaimed. And I thought that was the end of it, until I walked into the living room and saw it. A small silver flash drive on the coffee table. No label. Just sitting there like bait. And my stomach dropped. Because Brittany never left anything behind, unless she wanted it to be found. Not when every move she made was calculated and wrapped in that same fake sincerity. For a moment I considered leaving it alone, just tossing it, pretending it didn't exist. But after everything I'd survived, I wasn't going to let this story end on a loose thread. So I plugged the flash drive into Jason's old laptop, the one Brittany never touched because she said it smelled like dust and grief, and waited as the screen lit up. One folder. No password. Just a single file named Open Me. I clicked. The video was grainy at first, then cleared up as the camera focused. And there she was, Brittany, sitting in Jason's old office, the same chair I'd used that morning to check my email. She looked straight into the webcam and said, "If you're watching this, then I'm either gone, or you think you've won." Her tone was calm but smug. Like she still believed she was 3 steps ahead. Then she said, "I did what I had to do. And maybe I crossed a line. But you were never meant to stay here forever, Ellen. You were just a placeholder. A guest who overstayed her welcome." I paused the video. My jaw was tight. My heart pounding. Even now she was trying to claw at the one thing she could never take. My bond with my son. I hit play again. She leaned closer to the camera, voice low, eyes sharp. "Jason wanted to ask you to leave before he died. He just didn't have the guts to say it." And my chest burned, not because I believed her but because I knew she wanted me to. She went on. "I told him we could build something real if he let go of the past. But he was too weak. He couldn't cut the cord. So I did it for him." Then she smiled. That cold, hollow smile she used whenever she wanted to dress cruelty up as love. "You can keep the house, Ellen," she finished. "But you'll never forget this." The screen went black. I sat still in the quiet that followed. Not angry. Not surprised. Because that was always who she was. Controlled, manipulative, obsessed with having the last word. But what she didn't know was that I already had the only word that mattered. Jason's. I opened the drawer beside me and pulled out the letter. The one in his handwriting. The one she could never fake or overwrite. The one that began with, "I'm sorry," and ended with the truth. I held it beside the frozen image of her face on the laptop, and I felt nothing but peace. Because in the end, it wasn't about proving who was right. It was about surviving long enough to watch her lose control. I ejected the flash drive, tossed it into the trash, and deleted the file. Not because I was afraid of her lies but because I didn't need them anymore. The war was over. The house was quiet. Every room finally belonged to me again. That evening I unpacked the last of my boxes, the ones she had labeled for removal, put Jason's photo back on the entryway shelf, lit a candle on the kitchen counter and sat at the table. Alone. Not lonely. Just still. Just present. Just free. And as I sipped my tea and listened to the kind of silence that didn't carry fear or tension anymore, I looked out the window at the porch she once tried to claim and whispered, "My house. My rules." Then I smiled. Because for the first time since the funeral, I could breathe. In a space that was mine, Not because I fought to take it but because I never let her win.